Today's workshop has been organized in partnership with TISS, so I am actually not going to delay anything and hand it over to Archana Mehendale as professor at TISS.
Hello, hello everyone, and let me start by sharing my screen here. Give me a moment. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So again, welcome to the online workshop on strengthening effective partnerships to address the SDG 4, the role of impact bonds in education. And as you know, this is organized by Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, India, and the NORRAG Global Education Center at the Graduate Institute, Geneva, Switzerland. And as has been mentioned before, we really appreciate the support provided by Commission for Research Partnerships with Developing Countries and SCNAT for allowing us to run this online workshop. We will be sharing with you some of the work that we have been doing as part of our multi-country, multi-year collaborative project called the Innovative Financing in Education to Leave No One Behind. This project itself is supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDG. And there are a number of institutions that are partnering on this project. Two of the partners are here who have organized this workshop. So we have the Geneva Graduate Institute's NORRAG Global Education Center and Tata Institute of Social Sciences as consortium partners who are here today. But we also have partners from Bertha Center, University of Cape Town, South Africa, UBS Optimus Foundation, and Volta Capital. Together, we are part of this very exciting research project, and today's workshop is based on some of our learnings, and we are somewhere in the middle of this research project, so we are excited to also hear your views and suggestions and comments so that we can incorporate it as we proceed with our research project. Today's agenda is as follows. We'll first have, there are no breaks in between, but we'll immediately start off with the first session where I'll introduce the impact bonds in education very briefly, and then we'll invite Dr. Turtway to talk about effective research partnerships in addressing SDG 4. Session 2 is interactive. Here we will deep dive into 3 case studies where we will discuss different structures of innovative financing mechanisms, primarily the impact bonds. I hope you all have received the material well in advance and have had a chance to go through that material. And we'll come back, tie up the group discussions, and we'll conclude by sharing with you some of the reflections and learnings from our research partnership. So we'll have enough time to do that as well. As you can see, there are no breaks. It's a short 2-hour online workshop. So to start off, the focus of this workshop is on, as you can see, on impact bonds. And a number of you would have heard about innovative finance. Various reports in recent times have talked about innovative finance. And there are various mechanisms and structures by which innovative finance has been tried out in both developing as well as developed countries. Today, we will be focusing on impact bonds, but you might have heard about other mechanisms like venture philanthropy, microfinance has been popular for a very long time, ESG, blended finance, crowdfunding, and so on. So what is impact innovative finance? Before we go into discussing what is impact bonds, let's quickly look at how do we understand innovative finance? So literature doesn't really provide a clean definition of innovative finance. This definition has been put together by NORRAG as part of this work. And it essentially tries to summarize what innovative financing stands for. So innovative financing is really aiming to use creative financing structures or arrangements so that movement of funds is facilitated from sources that are interested in giving funds for a particular purpose or to particular causes. And these funds are being transferred to the sectors and domains that might need the funds to carry out these activities. So innovative financing essentially refers to use of these creatively designed structures and arrangements. And the purpose of really coming up with these mechanisms is twofold. Firstly, innovative financing tries to raise additional funds. And this is a very important objective because we all know that public spending is not as per the benchmark set by Education 2030. There is a financing gap for achieving SDG 4. So innovative financing is seen as one of the ways, the structures are seen as one of the ways by which additional funds can be raised from not only existing, but also new sources of funding, right? And the second objective of innovative financing is to maximize efficiency and effectiveness of funds that are already available so that they are able to reach the intended results. Literature talks a lot about wastage and lack of efficiency in public spending, as well as funds that are coming from the private sector. So innovative financing also is about maximizing efficiency and effectiveness in addition to raising additional funds. So in a nutshell, we can refer to innovative financing as a way to raise more financing and also better financing of social interventions. Very quickly, here is a schema of how the impact bonds work. So impact bonds have typically a range of stakeholders, and we'll see some of this in the case studies that we will discuss in the second session. Impact bonds typically have an investor or investors, very often from the private sector, who will provide working capital to service providers. Service providers are implementing partners that are responsible for actually delivering the program on the ground so as to create social outcomes with identified set of beneficiaries. So this service provider uses this working capital coming from the investor to run programs. These programs are then independently evaluated, and based on the outcomes achieved, the outcome payer will repay the investor the capital as well as make a premium or an interest payment based on the extent of outcomes achieved. All these aspects are put down in the contracts. Contracts are a very key part of impact bonds. And what outcomes have to be achieved, what outcomes will, the extent to which outcomes have to be achieved, how much should be the interest paid to the investor at what points of time is all decided in advance. How these outcomes have to be measured is also discussed in advance. The service provider is free to run the implementation the way the service provider deems fit. And based on the outcomes achieved, the outcome payer is going to sometimes also make a performance incentive payment to the service provider. So this is roughly speaking the structure. This is you could say a typical way in which an impact bond works. There are various departures from this, and some of that you'll also see in the case studies that we will discuss in the second session, but this is more or less a typical structure. There is a slight difference. Now, you may ask here, what is the role of the government? Here, an outcome payer can be a government or a private sector or a philanthropic organization. And who is the outcome payer will determine whether it is a social impact bond or a development impact bond. When an outcome payer is the government, where the government is actually repaying the investor the principal and paying the interest on achievement of the outcomes, it is called the social impact. And if the outcome payer is a donor, philanthropic organization, or a private sector entity, it is called a development impact. So in a development impact bond, all these actors, the outcome payers are private sector, whereas in the social impact bond, it is the government that is commissioning the entire structure, and the government is involved in repaying back the capital as well as an interest as per the contractual obligations. So some of the features of impact bonds, and we are calling these argued features because these are open to still further examination. So what are some of the features of impact bonds? The focus is on results, and some of the authors and in literature you will find impact bonds are also called as a form of results-based financing. Results-based financing is a broader term referring to funding that is tied to achievement of results. It is somewhat similar to results-based financing, but slightly different, because in impact bonds, as you observed, the investor is paying very often an upfront to working capital to the service provider to conduct its activities. But what is interesting in impact bonds is that the focus is on outcomes, achievement of social outcomes, in contrast to traditional financing, where the focus is typically on inputs, on the performance of the organization in terms of whether it has conducted X number of activities or has provided X number of workshops or done X number of trainings or delivered particular particular incentives to some of the beneficiaries. So in contrast to the traditional financing, the focus of impact bonds is on achieving measurable social outcomes. And this allows a lot of room and flexibility to the service providers to innovate. They have the flexibility, since the focus is on outcomes, the service providers can decide what they need to do in order to achieve the outcomes. There isn't any particular directive from the investor in terms of what needs to be done in order to achieve the outcomes. That is left to the expert, which is the service provider. The second feature pertains to the involvement of the private, and this is similar to any kind of PPP where you see a private sector involvement. But what is unique about impact bonds is that there is a risk sharing that is taking place. Whenever there is a government funding upfront, very often the government funds, public funds are at risk that the program might not succeed and the government funds might get wasted. On the other hand, here, the risk is expected to be transferred to the investor who is making that upfront payment without any guarantee or surety that an outcome will be achieved. So the idea is that the private investment is sharing the financial risk of a program likely to fail, thereby saving public funds that could be actually reserved for only programs that yield results. And the availability of upfront capital, it's argued, is also allowing the service providers to design their programs in the way they deem fit. The other set of features of impact bonds are quite akin to business-like approaches. I mean, there is a focus on accountability, a lot of focus on performance and performance management. There is a lot of focus also on how resources that are allocated are used efficiently. And this is akin to what you might see in a private sector or in business kind of models. And these you find very commonly used within the service providers that are actually part of impact bonds. And in other words, impact bonds become a financial structure that are trying to answer or provide a solution to educational challenges that are persistent, that are quite complex, that have not seen the inflow of funds. Impact bonds are trying to, because of its mechanisms, arguably trying to focus attention on providing this upfront capital so that the service providers can conduct their activities and achieve the outcomes. So in a way, the financial structure itself is proposed as a solution to deal with persistent education challenges. So some of the questions we have been interested in answering through our research project, and some of which we would really encourage all of you to think about when you are in the group discussions, pertain to four broad baskets. The first is to do with results. Since the focus is on results, since the focus is on outcomes, the question we are interested in asking is, are these interventions more effective in producing desirable outcomes because of the clear focus on outcomes, and because of the investment being tied to the outcomes? Is the investor more focused on ensuring that the service provider performs in a manner that the investment is able to see interest and returns? So does this outcome focus really help produce better social outcomes? And the second area is with regards to the financial return, as I said, is tied to outcomes. And does that really result in certain hard to reach populations getting excluded? Because the focus is on outcomes, and because the financial returns are tied to that, it is likely that service providers are reaching low hanging fruit, or are really focusing on the cream. And is that what is happening, and is that resulting in the populations getting excluded? There is also a risk sharing that I talked about, but we are interested in seeing, is this risk really shared between the public and the private? Financial risk is of one kind, but the service providers also face reputational risk. If they fail, then their reputation is at stake. And the public, that is the government funds, especially in social impact bonds, to what extent do these contractual arrangements really allow for this risk getting shared, or rather move to the private sector? The third area that we are interested in looking at is additionality. Are these mechanisms actually able to attract new funding, new in terms of new sources, as well as existing funding agencies for the first time, are they trying to invest in education? Or is it resulting in substitution effect, wherein you have existing funding organizations moving their traditional funding to now an outcome-based contract? And lastly, we are interested in looking at the question of efficiency. Is it cheaper? Are these structures cheaper, or are they costlier, but they are more effective? The reason why answering these questions is important, because it's important to see whether, if these innovative financing structures are going to change the way the government or the public or even philanthropic or private is going to now fund education. So very quickly, before I hand over to Dr. Terve, I wanted to share with you, as part of this project, we have created an impact bonds database, which is open access. I'll request Georgia to also share in the chat box the link so that you can access it. These are open access, these are regularly updated. And what is unique about this database is that it contains hyperlinks to additional public material that is released about these projects. And the 3 case studies that we've shared with you are also included in this database. And the projects database, this particular part, the projects part of the database, is interesting because it puts together 129 impact bonds that are aligned with SDG. So this includes those that are directly in the education sector, as well as those that have at least one outcome that is tied to the education or training. And now I will hand it over to Dr. Terve to discuss the role of effective research partnerships.
Thank you, Archana, for a fantastic overview of, sorry, let me just figure out the share screen feature here. A fantastic overview of what we are doing in our research here. I want to take a few minutes to talk about the research collaboration itself. Hopefully, after my presentation, you will start getting an idea on why is it that NORRAG and TISS are involved in this entire research project, and how this collaboration itself is benefiting and working. So I first do want to bring you back to why we are even discussing impact bonds. So impact bonds on their own are presenting a very much a dynamic change in SDG 4 partnership itself. So prior to about 2013, which is when the first impact bond Educate Girls within developing context was launched, the typical model, which still is a typical model, traditional financing model, was that the government will fund and provide education to beneficiaries directly. A lot of the public schools are being funded by the government, they're being run by the government. A slight modification of that when international donors or philanthropies are involved. Sometimes international donors would give the funding to the government and then government would run the program. Another modification of that, sometimes donors and especially philanthropic funders would give the funding to a service provider that would then put the funding towards providing a program to the beneficiaries. But this was it. These were mostly the partners involved, where a government donor and maybe a service provider, an NGO, or even a private for-profit organization would deliver education services. The change is happening with impact bonds, where a lot more actors are involved and partnering up to engage in financing and the provision. So Archana had explained how investors are giving upfront capital to service providers, and they implement the program to the beneficiaries. An independent evaluator comes in, verifies everything, tells the outcomes payer, yes, the program has been delivered, and then they engage with investors. This means in a very basic programs, more actors are already being introduced, and the whole partnership starts getting complicated or becomes more complex even in the delivery of the program. So you have new investors coming in. You have to have evaluators in to verify that the results were achieved. And in a lot of these programs, because of this whole complexity of how the money is moving and how evaluations are happening, some management and financial intermediaries also get involved that manage the entire partnership. The government is not necessarily the financial or programmatic partner, but they are in most countries involved in the regulation, either the financial or the education regulation of the programs. And in fact, impact bonds have a built-in research component in them. It is a design feature that there would be an independent evaluation of effective program delivery. Somebody outside of that main partnership has to evaluate whether the results are achieved or not. This is in the interest of all of the parties for it to be independent, because the investors will always want to make sure that the maximum results are being shown. But the outcomes payer would want to pay the least amount of money for the maximum results. So they want to make sure that every result is achieved. No one can trust each other in that. It's very difficult to do that and to remove biases. So an independent contractor is hired to do that verification. So that's a design feature within impact bonds. So there's a research collaboration, at least to test the effectiveness of the program delivery itself. But just because there is a financial innovation happening, it also creates a need for much more research. It's a new way of doing things, and we all need to be learning from it. So there are several research questions that come up. Archana has already put it in a framework. I'm going to put it in a few more terms where you can see how different types of questions are being asked by different actors. So everyone wants to know whether the financial structure itself is helping in achieving the SDG goals. So this is where we want to really know, what is it in the financial structure so it can be adopted, modified, figured out later on in helping reach the education outcomes like access, retention, learning, maybe employment if it's a secondary education program or a higher education program. Then most actors, investors, outcomes payers, are really interested in also making sure that their money is being spent efficiently. And here they usually mean cost efficiency in spending, that they're getting value for money. The least amount of money is being spent to achieve maximum results. But then what they are not necessarily always interested in, but the question of, is additional financing coming to SDG, or is it the substitution effect that Archana talked about? That top question is usually what most actors who are directly involved are interested in. But then there are bigger questions to answer as well, which were brought out by Archana earlier. Are there any adverse effects of the financial structure itself? It's a new way of doing things. Are there things that we are missing? Is it introducing any kind of negative outcomes in there? Sometimes it is argued that the whole results-based financing approach could exclude hard-to-reach populations. There could actually, in fact, be inefficient spending. Everyone may want to make sure that there's efficient spending, but there are other features happening in there, especially because of the newness of everything. There could be inefficiency. Then there could be perverse incentives involved for misallocation of funds. So is there more room for corruption with so many actors being involved? And then overall, everyone wants to learn what are the overall lessons that can be applied for a future program in the same context, for scaling up to a larger population, to replicate the entire thing into another context, and to even understand what is the impact on the entire education system. It's that systemic transformation that was mentioned earlier. How is that happening? Somebody needs to be studying all of that, and this creates an opportunity for people to learn that. So the challenge here is that the existing partners within an impact bond have very limited priorities in research. They have only so much funding and so much resources, human and time resources, to allocate towards learning. They will be most interested in learning whether the results were achieved, were they cost efficient, and they contract the independent evaluator to do that. Investors on their own will also be interested in learning assessing the cost of delivery. If they're going to deliver it again, how can they invest the smallest possible amount to get the maximum outcomes payment? So they would be interested in doing those types of calculation, and with that, cutting out any kind of wastage of funds. For this, they often hire an intermediary, a financial intermediary, a management intermediary, to check on these types of things and manage the entire process. However, this leaves a huge knowledge gap which can be filled. The last point is most important, in that a lot of the questions are something that everyone wants to know, but no one has the funding to allocate towards it, because it's something that everyone thinks somebody else would put money in, but no one ends up putting money in, at least not from within the small group. It is changing, and we will show that. So questions here are things like additionality. The big question, is this actually bringing in more money to SDG 4 financing? What are the lessons learned for future implementation? Adverse effects like inclusion of hard-to-reach population and the impact on the entire education system. These are very big questions that everyone wants to know, but it becomes secondary to the actual intervention that is happening. This is where a research collaboration comes in. There are lots of opportunities for additional actors, especially research and funding actors, to get involved. External research partners who are engaged in the larger SDG financing research agenda can be involved in learning those big picture questions. External donors who are engaged in both funding the research and in policy dialogue at the international level and at the national level can really be steering what research is getting done and how that research learning is adopted at the policy level. Researchers at national and subnational level have immense knowledge and expertise on the local education, economic, social, and political context. They can be bringing in that knowledge and really applying to the data gathered. And then researchers at international level have international and comparative perspective, so they can be looking at information across cases and bringing it up to the international arena for uptake. So here I'm going to just quickly introduce how we are doing this in the IFE-2-Leave No One Behind project, which is where all of this information is coming from. We have research organizations from the Global South and Global North. So NORRAG, the Global Education Center at the Geneva Graduate Institute, represents usually the Global North. And then Tata Institute of Social Sciences and University of Cape Town are from the Global South, really looking at the contextual information. But then we also collaborate with the implementing partners. Here we have collaboration with Volta Capital and UBS Optimus Foundation, who are the financial investors and intermediaries for the initiatives that we are studying. So what we do is we conduct formative evaluation research for the implementing partners and their initiative partners to really do some checking on whether they're reaching the goals that they wanted to reach. But we also then conduct summative evaluation and do a comparative analysis to really not just the initiative partners, but the national and global level audience. And we have been very lucky that we actually get the funding, co-funding from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, who's interested in these types of questions, from the research partners and the implementing partners. So everyone who's interested in these big questions is pooling their resources, the knowledge and the financial resources to get to this. We will pause for some quick Q&A before going into the breakout rooms. Oh, sorry, before giving you an introduction to all of the cases. So I will pass the floor to Marina to let us know what questions have been coming in.
Yes, so we got a very good questions from Fatih Aktas in the chat. So I'll read that for you. It would be great if you could address that. So they're asking, I wonder in which countries are the mechanism of impact bonds adopted more frequently? And also, is there any evidence from the literature that the excessive reliance on impact bonds run against the premise of welfare states, considering the focus on efficiency? But I wonder if there has been any similar emphasis put on quality. So if you could address that one. Yep.
I'll go ahead, quickly address some of those. So yes, impact bonds, especially in education, have been implemented more in OECD countries and the global north in general. However, there is a growing use of it in the global south. I would be hesitant to say that there has been an excessive reliance on impact bonds as yet. As you will be able to see in the database that Archana mentioned, and the link will be shared in the chat, up to now, there are only 129 impact bonds across the world, which is a very small amount compared to other financing mechanisms, especially traditional financing mechanism. The efficiency question is what we want to be answering through case studies. There are some quick analyses that have been done, but we just don't have enough cases to be able to answer that at a systemic level. Archana, would you like to add to that?
Just a couple of points. It's a very good question. The numbers have always really intrigued us. And if you look at the impact bond database, you will be able to search by countries and you'll be able to do the filtering because it takes you to a spreadsheet. And you will find that in India, in fact, there has been a large-scale experimentation on impact bonds. We ran the first education impact bond in India called Educate Girls. And based on the success of that, the second and the third, and now the fourth one on education has started. There is another one on skills. But just to quickly answer your question on quality, and that is a very important part for us because we are a research center that looks at building teacher capacities as well as education quality. We think that quality can get really reduced in some of these bonds if the focus is exclusively on outcomes. But unfortunately, as you will see in the database, and this is based on publicly available material, we do not necessarily have information about the specifics of outcomes that are being targeted in each of these impact bonds. There is definitely a focus on achieving improved learning quality in terms of either grade appropriate literacy and numeracy skills or early grade literacy numeracy. There are also examples of emotional and social and emotional well-being, digital competencies. So there are examples of various outcomes that are covered. But as you know, quality is a very subjective term. And it is very difficult to identify whether all aspects of quality really are getting addressed through these impact bonds.
Thank you both very much. I think we have time for just one more question. And we just received one from Lingon Matthew on the partnership side itself. And they ask, how will you integrate the expertise of national and subnational researchers with the international perspectives of global researchers to effectively leverage external donor funding for the SDG 4 financing research agenda? Archana, do you want to start with that one?
Thanks for your question, Matthew. I think that is something that we are really trying to work ourselves and demonstrate, because as was explained earlier, one of the objectives of this research partnership is to really bring partners and researchers from various global north and global south institutions. But you're right about subnational researchers. We find in the specific national context, understanding of these this new emerging area of work itself is limited. As a result, one of the things we think there is a need to do is to talk about education financing in general and innovative financing in particular with both subnational researchers as well as implementing partners. We find that is also another area which is lacking. A lot of service providers who are working in the field, struggling to find funds, do not have necessarily access to this information. And it is necessary to bring in these voices in the context of evolving global discourse on this topic. So one of the objectives of this IFE-2-LNOP project is also to bring together these voices from global north and global south to inform, based on the evidence that we gather through this study, inform the policy discourse on this evolving area of work. Arushi, if you would like to add anything.
Just that this is the main reason NORRAG and TISS and University of Cape Town is partnering up on this project, because we want to make sure that cross dialogue is actually happening. And because of that, a lot of the national level and international level donors are also interested in funding this type of research. So we are in constant dialogue with them and adding more research case studies to the project.
Great. Thank you both. We've been receiving some more questions in the chat in the meantime. I suggest that we move on, but for all participants, do remember that we are going to move into breakout rooms soon, so we'll have a chance to engage in further discussions at that point. Over. Yep.
Thank you, Marina. Let's move to the session, the next session, where I'll take about 10-15 minutes to introduce you to the three financing mechanisms. That material has already been shared with you, and I hope some of you who had registered in advance had an opportunity to look at the material. But some of the material might not actually showcase all that we are interested in highlighting, and hence just give me a second to share my slides. So just wanted to share with you the three financing mechanisms, the three impact bonds. So you would have seen in the background material for this workshop, we proposed, we picked only three. There are many, as you know, the impact bond database will show you the number of projects that are there. But we picked these three because we are actively studying these three, and these are of our interest. We will look at the Quality Education India Development Impact Bond, QEI for short. We will then look at the initiatives under the Education Outcomes Fund for Africa and Middle East, particularly the Sierra Leone Education Innovation Challenge and the Ghana Education Outcomes Project. And lastly, we will look at the Haryana Early Literacy Development Impact Bond. So very quickly, I wanted to just highlight the key features because some of you might have registered relatively, later in the day, and you might not have had an opportunity. Just wanted to show some of the key highlights of each of these bonds. So the QEI Development Impact Bond was launched in India as one of the largest impact bonds. So India had the first impact bond, which is on education, which is Educate Girls, which I just mentioned. But we also had the largest in terms of the number of beneficiaries that were proposed to be covered, which is around 200,000 beneficiaries. And this was built on the successes of the earlier experience of Educate Girls, which was very well covered in the media and was highly successful. So building on the success, the QEI DIB was formulated and designed. And this ran through 2018 to 2022. And you will notice this was right in the period of COVID, and there were some adaptations that took place as well. The key objectives of this impact bond were threefold. One, at the level of the beneficiaries, at the primary level, the impact bond, the QEI impact bond, sought to improve grade appropriate learning outcomes, namely improvement in literacy and numeracy skills. But at the secondary and tertiary level, it also tried to create certain systemic changes. One of the objectives was to reduce the transaction costs of structuring and designing these bonds by standardizing certain processes, the kind of assessment frameworks that are used. Also, if possible, create a rate card so that there is a standardized pricing of outcomes. And overall, the intention was to help move towards outcome-based financing by bringing in the government also in future as an outcome funder, because in the QEI DIB, the government was not directly involved. So the structure roughly was as follows. The investor was the UBS Optimus Foundation, which invested approximately $3 million US dollars. It provided this upfront capital to the service providers. There were 4 service providers, SARD, Gyanshala, Kaivalya, and the fourth one was actually a collaboration between Pratham as well as education initiatives. These service providers actually ran the intervention in different states across India and targeted the students studying in government schools as well as remedial centers. Remedial centers are those that were catering to children who were not attending the schools. They were out of school. And throughout this process, there was a role played by the performance manager, that was Dalberg, which helped the service providers focus on their, keep the focus on the outcomes, monitor the progress, and provide inputs on how to really improve the performance. At the end of the project period, and in fact annually, there was a third-party evaluator that that was Convergenius India, that conducted annual and final evaluations and provided the same to the outcome funders. Now, outcome funders, there was a consortium. Anchor outcome funder was the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, which had committed about $4 million US dollars. And then there were a set of other funders that were also brought on board. And annually, based on the outcomes achieved, as well as at the end of the project period, based on the outcomes achieved, the outcome funders paid the principal as well as 8% interest based on the performance achieved. This was a successful impact bond. So the investor did receive 8% annual interest at the end. And this entire structure was convened by British Asia Trust. There is a very key role of a convener or an intermediary, as was referred to earlier by Dr. Terve. The convener was British Asia Trust. And we'll move on to the next one in the interest of time. The second one is this, as I said, a part of Education Outcomes Fund for Africa and Middle East. These two are the Sierra Leone Education Innovation Challenge and the Ghana Education Outcomes Project. And the focus area of these interventions are early childhood development, basic education, and skills for work. These were launched relatively recently, 2022. And this also has contracted multiple service providers to run the interventions. So the goals of the Education Outcomes Fund overall are to improve the national education systems by providing inclusive quality education and training for about 10 million children and youth across Africa and Middle East, and make $1 billion available by 2030 to support governments' efforts in financing education and youth employment. And the structure of the EOF is interesting. This is again provided in your reading material. There is an Education Outcomes Fund, which is set up by UNICEF. Country governments as well as outcome co-funders put in their money, pledge their money as an escrow, which is maintained by the Education Outcomes Fund. And this is actually the structure by which the money is managed. The impact investors provide upfront payment to the service providers that run programs in public education schools, public education system in government schools, and benefiting children and youth. These are independently again evaluated, and based on the outcomes achieved, the Education Outcomes Fund will make the payments to the impact investors based on whatever is contractually signed. And it's different for Ghana and it is different for Sierra Leone. And in doing so, the government capacity is built and lessons of this experiences can also be taken up by the government. The third case study is about Haryana, the Haryana Early Literacy Bond. This was launched in India with only domestic investors, and this was the first one to be launched with totally domestic funds coming from the Corporate Social Responsibility Clause of the Companies Act in India, which requires corporate sector to set aside amounts for social development causes. And this, you may find, as I'll soon explain, this departs from the typical DIB structure that I had shown earlier. And this was done in order to comply with some of the regulatory norms that are applicable to corporate social responsibility. And this was again implemented, around the time COVID struck all of us, between 2019 and 2022. The main objective of the Haryana Early Literacy Development Impact Bond was to improve literacy outcomes for grade 1 and grade 2 students across 7 districts of Haryana. Haryana is a state in northern India, and also to enhance the capacity and commitment of the government education system for improving foundational literacy learning outcomes at scale. So the structure of Haryana Early Literacy DIB was unique because it had the outcomes funder, which was, as I said, Corporate Social Responsibility Funds, IndusInd Bank, and the State Bank of India Foundation. They provided upfront capital to the service provider. There was only one service provider, Language and Literacy Foundation, to deliver its intervention with the government schools in Haryana. It is interesting here because the outcome funder is the one that has given upfront capital instead of coming in later and paying the investor contingent upon achievement of outcomes. So here it is different, as I said, because outcome funder paid upfront, because the corporate social responsibility funds have to be paid within the year, within the financial year. And the service provider implemented this in close partnership with the government of Haryana, but the government of Haryana was not party to the contract directly. Based on the outcomes achieved, which were evaluated by education initiatives, EI, there was a risk guarantor who had committed to compensate if the outcomes were not achieved. They had committed to compensate to the outcome funder if the outcomes were not achieved. So a risk guarantor as a role, a new role was created because of the need to have this entire funding tied to outcomes. So if the outcomes had not been achieved, the risk guarantor would have compensated IndusInd Bank and SBI Foundation, up to the extent that was specified in the contract. This entire structure was convened by Social Finance India, which served as an intermediary. And you will notice that the structure is different. It has fewer service providers as well. Here are some of the questions we want you to take up when you are in your respective breakout rooms. All of you have, I think, indicated what breakout room you would like to be in, which of the case studies you would like to discuss in detail. So based on the preferences that you have indicated in the registration form, based on that and keeping in mind, the need to balance the breakout rooms, we have tried our best to give you the first preference, if not the second, but these breakout rooms have already been created. So you will have some of these questions that will get discussed in the breakout rooms. We want you to look at the rationale, try to understand what education challenge was being addressed by use of these impact bonds in the specific case that you will look at. The second thing that we want you to look at is the critical actors. And you will find that there are different kinds of actors and different kinds of roles in each of these mechanisms. But we would like you to compare these to traditional funding and see what new roles actually got created by these mechanisms and who were specifically the key actors involved. Thirdly, we would like you to look at the mechanism itself. What kind of mechanism? This is an impact bond mechanism, but what was the specific feature of the particular mechanism that you will discuss? And what kind of benefits were being perceived that would accrue over compared to the traditional mechanisms? And does this mechanism become innovative because of the use of these features? That's also something that we encourage you to discuss openly. The fourth area we suggest you discuss is that on partnerships and motivations. So look at what benefits would accrue to the individual actors that are engaging in this model. There are multiple actors, right? So there is a service provider, government, sometimes involved, outcomes payers, investors, evaluators, intermediaries. There are performance managers. So what are their motivations and what are they getting out of this model? And finally, some of these material that we have shared are also referring to the evaluation, the outcomes and the results achieved. In the case of EOF, the Education Outcomes Fund, the results are not yet achieved. Hence, you could discuss what is likely to occur and what are the kind of outcomes being targeted. But in the case of Quality Education India DIB, as well as the Haryana Early Literacy DIB, you could examine the kind of outcomes that have been achieved and discuss if you think these have been due to the financing mechanism. You will have, each of the breakout rooms will have facilitators. So any additional clarifications you may need on the material that was shared with you or what I have shared right now, that can be provided by the facilitators. So kindly wait to be directed to your respective breakout rooms and come back after 30 minutes. There will be a rapporteur who will take notes, but come back to share the summary of your discussions with the larger group.
Based on what we saw in our group, it appears that we have had a very, very stimulating conversation, an educational conversation too. So I'd now invite the leaders from each of the groups to report back on what was discussed. We will start with Professor Archana Mahendale for her group. And then we'll go to Dr. Imon Nandi and then finally to Dr. Rushita.
Yeah, thanks. I will invite Nisha, who was taking notes in the room. Nisha, if you are ready, you can unmute and present. While Nisha is coming,
okay.
I must say we didn't finish. Yeah.
So, we discussed all the main questions and actually, instead of questions, the participants posed more questions. So our discussion mainly, first of all, we did discuss about the rationale, and we found that, the education challenge that was, of course, being addressed was FLN skills, the foundational literacy and numeracy skills. And it was discussed that since 55% of the children cannot read, and the literature mentions this, that is why, this DIB was focusing on that. It also was one of the challenges to tap into the resource pool, and that's what this DIB was also addressing, that challenge as well. Some of the questions that were raised were very interesting. So because the nature of funders, I mean, they were CSRs, which are corporate social responsibility part of private sector. That is why, one of the questions that was asked was that, what returns did they receive? Were there any incentives that were received at the successful completion of the DIB? And what was the risk of the investment that had already been made, and the outcomes not being achieved? So that was a few questions about the financing mechanism. And then of course we also discussed the partnerships and the motivation. So first of all, some questions did come about critical actors such as the government, the role of government, and why were they interested, how were they partnering with in this impact bond. And of course we also asked that program, what were the program design aspects of this, because it looks that somebody needs to hold together the entire impact bond. And that was one of the things that really came up. We discussed that as well. There was this question that as compared to traditional financing, it seems like impact bonds are bringing in private capital, in the sense that there will be outcome funders who will be interested in receiving returns, and that will be the main attraction for them. And that is why impact bonds would are achieving what they are setting out to achieve, that which is attracting private capital. So that was something that was also discussed. The role of the government, and that was discussed quite a bit, because government seems to be benefiting from the influx of new partners who can fund education, who can bring this focus on educational outcomes back to it. So that was one. And of course the role of evaluation. So it seems that evaluation of these impact bonds, and the role of evaluator, and how and when is it actually being constructed, that was also something. So basically there was this question on, which was very interesting, that whether outcome evaluation is decided before the structuring of the entire DIB, or is it after? So that was one question that was raised. And then finally we had this discussion on ways of funding. And one of the participants did bring this, that there are multiple interventions in the same sector, probably, for example, in a same school, and these interventions are supporting different programs. But why not kind of pool these resources and create a greater impact? And what is the role of evaluation in that, as well as what is the role of some sort of consortium to bring them together and implementing programs together? So I hope I haven't missed out anything, but Archana ma'am, if you can share something that I might have missed out on.
No, I think that was from my point of view, I think it was fairly comprehensive. But if any of the members would like to add, I mean, because we kind of were in the middle of the discussion when we had to come back to the main session. So if there's anybody from the group that would like to add, I'm answering Lucas's question in the chat, Lucas, but anybody else wants to add?
All right. If there are no more questions or no more comments from the group, this was Haryana Early Literacy Development Impact Bond, by the way. So we move to Dr. Imon Nandi for a debrief on the QEI, Quality Education in India. Over to you. You'll have to unmute yourself. Can we unmute Imon, please?
Thank you. Yes, so we started with the first question, that what was the educational challenge that QEI Development Impact Bond tried to address? And we came up with answers related to literacy levels between grade 2 and 5, they said, and the infrastructure challenges, accountability issues. Someone also mentioned that. We also discussed a bit of the critical actors and their roles. For instance, how different partners had very different roles and they were addressing different challenges or different issues that would come up. Also, we moved a bit beyond Quality Education India Development Impact Band, also discussed the other challenges that we could see in the educational landscape, and probably other DIBs or innovative financing mechanisms can take up. For example, completion challenge, dropout issues, school facility related issues, location of schools, etc. When we talked about the critical actors and the new roles created, participants discussed that it is a very different approach compared to the traditional funding. And it's a altogether new approach. And that's why, it taps into the need and estimate cost, for example. They need different kind of expertise to do this, different kind of expertise to do the independent evaluation. So that's why we have seen multiple roles created for different actors. We talked about outcome evaluator, as I just mentioned about. We talked about performance manager, and we also initiated the discussion to think about the role played by the British Asian Trust, the outcome convener and intermediary. But again, keeping an eye on the time, we couldn't go deep on this. We moved to the financing mechanism, and there we talked about the unique features of this instrument, that investor can get their entire money back. So that is an incentive for the investor. And then similarly, the benefits for the outcome payer to get involved in a DIB kind of a structure where their risk is insulated. We talked about the outcome-based payment model that is focusing on outcomes. And that is also, the participants mentioned that it is very different from the traditional input-based funding, where we mostly focus on inputs, but this is an outcome-based funding. So they discussed it emphatically. Then about the partnerships and actor motivation, we couldn't have much time to reflect on that, but we weave together with the earlier question and the next question, that why a service provider or a government or an outcome payer or an investor would be interested, and what would be their gains and benefits and challenges of getting involved in a DIB kind of a structure. Then we talked about the expected results, whether they achieve to showcase the results that they envisaged for. And participants talked about what was reported in the document we shared with them, that they have achieved most of the targets. Then we talked about the partnership aspect, that multiple partners came together, and whether it led to more accountability, because different actors have different role, and then they tried to ensure accountability especially focusing on outcomes. They had a singular goal of focusing on outcomes. We also talked about sustainability and building ecosystem through building new public-private partnerships for future collaborations like development impact bond or move to another innovative financing mechanisms. So it was kind of a consensus that the model is cleaner than traditional mechanisms in terms of its structure, and outcomes were targeted and they were achieved, and it has a replicability according to our participants. And they think that by providing finance, they could also go beyond education, and poverty eradication could be done, and then it would help the not only SDG 4, but all other development challenges in Global South. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nandi. I think in the interest of time, I would directly move to Dr. Arishit Darve to report back on the discussions we had in our group. I was in the group too, so yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Manyar. So in the interest of time, I will actually shorten my report back and not give you the factual information that's in the case study, however, focus more on some of the unique discussions that came out in our group. So we were looking at both Ghana and Sierra Leone. The Ghana program is underway. Sierra Leone program is underway. Ghana is also happening at the moment. They haven't finished, so we don't have the results yet. However, we discussed how in Ghana, the focus was on enrolling out-of-school children, especially girls, and improving their learning. The problem that they identified with the education was that the levels of learning was low, but they were also not finishing the expected years of schooling. So that's the problem that is being tackled by the EOF Education Outcomes Fund projects. There are critical actors that are involved are investors, which is Bridges Outcomes Partnership, Jacobs Foundation, service providers. And here's a unique thing that somebody brought up, is that in the Ghana program, there is international service providers partnering up with local service providers, which brings out the question of potentially diverging interests and expertise between the two types of actors. Here, I did want to mention that this may not be a unique feature of impact bonds. Something that even traditional donor financing does often is international NGOs or service providers partnering up with local ones, because the local NGOs have more capacity and information about how things are done. So it may be even that something is being borrowed from traditional financing into the impact bond innovative financing. We did spend more time on the partner motivation side of things. And here I wanted to bring out some interesting points for the EOF program. Service providers are interested potentially because it expands the scope of their work, but then also gives them visibility for becoming part of such a big program. It's giving them access to funds, but that reputation and visibility factor might be what's interesting to them in participating in here. Investors are interested because they're getting a financial return. They are earning a profit on something like this. However, there's a secondary interest as well, which was brought in on corporate social responsibility, which I know is a mandate in India, but it is an ethos that a lot of companies have, where their shareholders and investors are demanding them to put money towards things that are doing social development in the world. So using their money responsibly. So it might be of interest to them, even if they lose money, to be participating in a program like this to do that. Outcomes pairs, some people brought up that they might be looking for stimulating private sector investment and catalyzing more funding coming towards education. But then we also discussed that it may also carry a risk of bringing in neoliberal ideologies into the education system. And with the government putting the responsibility of provision of education on private actors, it may also start bringing in more and more neoliberal and privatization ideologies into the education system by using mechanisms like this. So another thing that we discussed, which is supposed to be an argued benefit of impact bonds or results-based financing in general, is that the government might be interested in participating in a results-based financing approach because they won't waste money on ineffective programs. So because they're only paying after the results are achieved, they may not need to, they may save money on investing in interventions that don't actually work. Those were some of the main ones. There were lots and lots more discussions, and we will try to incorporate this in the event highlights that will be shared with all of you later on, but this is what was very interesting from our group. Is there anything anyone else would like to add from our group into this?
I guess not.
You can raise your hand and we can try to.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. So with that, I would like to open it up to everyone. We, what was interesting was that all the three cases call themselves DIBs, but they are very different, or they have unique features and they're different mechanisms. So I'm hoping that when you heard other people speak about their reports, you might have had things to share or ideas to share. If anyone wants to do that, we can take maybe one or two such comments, and then we move to the reflections and closing of the session. Is there anyone who would like to say something which is common, cuts across? Unfortunately, I'm not able to see everyone, so somebody's raising their hand. If there's nothing, then maybe we can just move on to Mr. Mahendale and Dr. Terve for reflection, and then a closing session. Yeah. So over to you, over to both of you. I guess they'll have to be on.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Vikas Maniar, for really summarizing everything that the groups presented. But yeah, we are now in the session, the last segment, where we will share with you some of our learnings and insights from running a project together, a collaborative research. And I would request Dr. Terve as a project director, to start off first, and I'll add some of my own insights and learnings before we conclude. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Mahendale. So today we were just giving you a taste of the types of questions we as research collaborators sit around and discuss. So I showed you some of the unique features of our research collaboration early on, but I wanted to remind everyone of them again. So within this project, we are three research institutions sitting together, asking a lot of these big questions that we have posed to you today about innovative finance. We just showed you some of the impact bond models, but we are studying student financing, social impact incentives, impact-linked payment, loans, things like that as well. And most of the time, we are asking these big questions on what is the need for SDG 4, Sustainable Development Goal 4, on quality education? What are the dynamics that are happening at the national level? And then what are the discussions that are happening at the international level? And what evidence needs to be fed in for an evidence-informed policy dialogue and policy making for all actors? Now, the benefit we have is of NORRAG with its membership of over 5,000 members, half of them from the Global South, we have a global perspective. We are able to see through our membership interaction, what are the comparative challenges that are coming across in multiple countries in different regions. However, our research partners, Tata Institute of Social Sciences and University of Cape Town, are able to delve so much deeper into the actual context. And with that, we do a lot of mutual learning around the table, where we, our research team now is almost 30 people across the 3 institutions. We actually sit together and discuss and delve into all of these questions. The data comes in, we figure out like, what is the interpretation here? What's really happening? Thinking about it from the international side, because a lot of the partners that are implementing are international, some are national. What is that dialogue happening? So that's on the research side. However, none of this would have been possible without the partnership with our implementing partners, who are the private actors. At least in my group, I started hearing these skepticisms of privatization, neoliberal ideas coming into welfare states, which are fantastic questions. We need to be asking those questions. However, asking those questions from the outside and just giving our opinion from far away on those actors does not fill in that knowledge gap. We may speculate on why they're doing things, but in this project, we are actually able to sit down with those actors and ask them about their motivation. The reason we are able to do that is they have directly partnered with us because they are interested in answering some of the questions where they have set off lofty goals for themselves. This is what they put out in their external documents. We want to achieve equity. We want to bring in additional financing. We want to make sure that our programs are more effective. We want to catalyze private investment, all of these lofty things. Now we sit with them, look at what they're actually doing, what are the results of this, and feed back to them on whether they are achieving those goals that they've set out or not. And we help them engage with the global and the national dialogue, policy dialogue community. So what we are doing with them is formative evaluation, where every year we collect data and we discuss with them how things are happening. And then we are using all of that to compare it across different cases and get some cross-learning happening between different cases in different countries. And we also present that type of data internationally. So we try to do that comparative analysis. And at the end of this project, which is 2026 is when we stop data collection, 27 is when we publish a lot of the material, we'll be able to produce and show you a lot of this summative evaluation and some of the answers that are coming out to these questions. I will tell you that all of the answers will be very contextualized, so you will not find any this is how to do an impact bond type of answers, but you will see what works under what condition, what challenges were there, what was addressed, what was not addressed, those types of answers. So I would say in this partnership, in this research collaboration, the 2 key aspects of making this effective is having the global and the Global North and the Global South partnership, having the international comparative perspective and the local experience and national perspective, and then also partnering up directly with the private actors to understand their perspective and engage them in conversation. Those are my some lofty reflections on the research collaboration itself. So Dr. Mandele, to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rushi. I think those were really the highlights, I must say, of our ongoing partnership and what we can draw from this fascinating multi-partner, multi-year project. I just have 2 more points to add, and some of it aligns with what you've already mentioned. And I think this might be applicable to a lot of projects that are, that involve a range of collaborators spread across different countries, spread across different disciplinary orientations, and so on. So My first point is with regards to this process, as you said, of cross-learning. And I think prior to the process of cross-learning at our end, given the various disciplinary orientations we have come with, given the kind of specific orientation we have come with as a university, where we have really looked at private sector investment with a lot of suspicion, with a lot of us really looking at any kind of private sector engagement as being really only in a way that based on only the secondary data with no direct access to private actors. I think what this has taught us is unlearning a lot of things, and a lot of ways with which we have approached some of the problems. It has taught us to learn new things, new terminology, new language, new ideas, engage with these, and then be in a position where we can participate in this cross-learning experience. So it has been a process of unlearning, learning, and then participating in cross-learning. And the second point is really with regards to, again, given the differences, we come from different countries, we are working in different countries, we are spread across the world from Australia to the United States, working across different time zones. Most of us being virtual communication and interaction, given the kind of spread that we have. I think a very crucial part, which is often not recognized in these collaborative efforts, is the need to build relationship and build trust. Because as research partners and as implementing partners, navigating in this new territory, where we are all in a way trying to understand how these innovative structures will actually help meet SDG 4 goals, we are really interested and we have spent a lot of time in building those relationships and building trust across partners. And this happens not only through online workshops and meetings, but also we are really doing our best to meet wherever possible in person, at least a few of us, because that's so critical for building dialogue and really fostering these kind of intersectoral partnerships. We are on the time, so I will leave it to you for your closing remarks.
Thank you, Archana. So yeah, we are at time. Before we close, I would love to get a photo for the event so we can show it on our social media and on the website. So I will request Annika and Kamlesh to take these pictures. Annika, if you could stop the spotlight on us so we can get everyone's faces. So whoever has a camera, please go ahead and turn it on, at least for this bit of it. That way your face will be in the social media for that you participated. I'll give another few seconds for everyone to turn on their cameras. Fantastic. All right. So Annika, just let us know when you're done.
Okay, I'm gonna take the photo now. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I got a few good ones.
Great, thank you. So in the chat message, you will also see we've shared our social media there, so follow that. That will show you this photo, but also other announcements. We do a lot of events through NORRAG and TISS. We will also be sending out a post-event survey. Please fill this out, so that will help us actually organize other events and improve on our events. We will also be sharing, for everyone who registered, you will be receiving in another few days an events highlights, which is a summary narrative of everything we've discussed today, along with a recording of this. So whoever did not want to be in the recording, I hope you kept your camera off for that bit of it. Otherwise, we are looking forward to seeing you in other events. Please feel free to sign up for NORRAG's network. That way you will be up to date with all the things that are happening at NORRAG and be able to participate in other events as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.